Hi there. Now we're going to do lesson 71. Only God's plan for salvation will work. Only God's plan for salvation will work. You may not realize that the ego has set up a plan for salvation in opposition to God's. It is this plan in which you believe. Since it is the opposite of God's, you also believe that to accept God's plan in place of the ego's is to be damned. This sounds preposterous, of course. Yet after we have considered just what the ego's plan is, perhaps you will realize that however preposterous it may be, you do believe in it. Now we got to be really clear that we are invested in making the world real. That's why the outer things seem to have so much power over us, because we have given it power. So the ego's concept of salvation is that the world is going to save me. So to think that coming inside and changing our opinion about the world is what saves us does seem crazy. That's why it's so difficult to give up believing in the ego. But the only way we will save ourselves is to come to realize how powerful our mind is. Our mind is a projector of what we want to experience. When you understand the power in the mind, we are using the same mind God uses. There are no other minds. There's only one mind. And when we access that mind in alignment with God, what we will see is very different. We will see the world that God has created that is real and beautiful and amazing. But we have overlaid the ego's perception on it. And now the things that are supposed to just be experiences for us to have become the things that we believe give us our salvation, our safety, our protection, our abundance, our love, our joy, our peace, our happiness. This is why this takes a long time, because we have to totally retrain our mind to see things differently. Paragraph 2. The ego's plan for salvation centers around holding grievances. It maintains that if someone else spoke or acted differently, if some external circumstance or event were changed, you would be saved. Kind of what I just said. The ego believes that if other people out there would act or behave differently, that if something external, some event changed, if he only would have proposed, if he would not have asked for the divorce, if she would not have left me, if he would have promoted me, if mom would not have died, if my child did not get sick, if the dog did not get hit by a car, if that person didn't cut me off, if this, that, or the other didn't happen, or if that would have happened, if I would have gotten something, then we believe that these external circumstances, if they changed, then we would be saved. Then we would be free to be happy. But it's impossible, because those are a lot of moving parts, and none of those moving parts have as their primary focus our happiness. All those moving parts have at their primary focus their happiness. Sentence number 3 in paragraph 2. Thus, the source of salvation is constantly perceived as outside yourself. Each grievance you hold is a declaration and an assertion in which you believe that says, if this were different, I would be saved. The change of mind necessary for salvation is thus demanded of everyone and everything except yourself. How many times have you said, honestly, before you began to understand that this is the path to freedom, did you say, I just judged my child, I just judged my spouse. I really am sorry that I judged them and put them on the hook for my happiness. How crazy is that of me? I should have known that my happiness was dependent only on me, and I just used them in that moment to let the ego bamboozle me into believing that there was power outside of me. We didn't say things like that. We said, you hurt my feelings. You abandoned me. You left me alone. You made me sad. You made me mad. You made me glad. You make me happy. You fulfill me. You complete me. You are in charge of my happiness. This is so key that we understand. I'm going to read the title again. Only God's plans for salvation will work. Because if you don't understand God's plan, you're always operating in opposition to it, which means you're operating inside of the ego's plan. which its function is to oppose God's. Paragraph 3. The role assigned to your own mind in this plan, then, is simply to determine what, other than itself, must change if you are to be saved. The role assigned to your mind in this plan, then, is simply to determine what, other than itself, must change if you are to be saved. According to this insane plan, any perceived source of salvation is acceptable provided that it will not work. So we're talking about the ego's plan here. So the ego believes that something other than my mind needs to be changed. And it sets us up to not work. Why? Because we can't control circumstances that change. We cannot control anything outside of ourselves, because everything outside of ourselves is having its own experience. Sentence number 3. This ensures that the fruitless search will continue. This is why we never achieve happiness according to the ego. We're always chasing the next best car to keep us safe, the next best car to make us look good, the next biggest house to feel like we arrived, the next amount of money to tell us that we are successful, the next retirement program that will keep us safe, the next thing, the next lover, the next jewelry, the next this, that, or the other, the next promotion. It's a constant fruitless search, because once you attain it, the ego says, time for the next one. All right, let me read sentence 3 again. This ensures the fruitless search will continue, for the illusion persists that, although this hope has always failed, there is still grounds for hope in other places and in other things. So the ego keeps us hoping that this is going to work one day. Sentence 4, another person will yet serve better. Maybe my next husband will be the one. Maybe my next girlfriend will be the one. Another situation will yet offer success. Maybe it's the next job where I'll succeed, where I'll be happy, where I'll be seen as this great contributor that I am. Paragraph 4, such is the ego's plan for salvation. Surely you can see how it is in strict accord with the ego's basic doctrine. This is key. This is the ego's basic doctrine. Seek, but do not find. Seek, but do not find. The ego wants us to be on a perpetual spiritual search. And yes, the spiritual search leads us to the recognition that everything that we've been looking for is inside, but we have to get off the spiritual merry-go-round at some point. We got to get off the spiritual cul-de-sac at some point and begin to take what this course is telling us as the truth of who we are, because it's in affirming the truth of who we are that we begin to understand God's plan. Now let's go to sentence number 3 in paragraph 4. For what could more surely guarantee that you will not find salvation than to channelize all your efforts in searching for it where it is not? Granted, the ego is quite tricky, but it cannot outwit a mind that has been trained to know what the truth is. So our work is to begin to sort out what is ego, what is God, what is illusion, what is truth. And then train ourselves to choose, shift our perception. Tell the ego, this is not true anymore. I'm not going to believe something that I know is not my truth. I'm going to choose to believe what is true. So we're moving on a bridge from believing the ego to believing God, but we got to do it in baby steps. We're learning to believe truth that was out of our perception for so long, out of our awareness. So it's like we're trying to create something brand new for us. Even though it's a remembering, we're slowly remembering our truth. But we have to recognize that the ego is going to take us on an endless search, and only the decision to stop seeking and to begin to accept the truth as it is what begins the process of salvation. So let's go to paragraph 5. God's plan for salvation works simply because by following his direction, you seek for salvation where it is. As we begin to read and understand God's plan, now we know where to go for salvation. But if you are to succeed, as God promises you will, you must be willing to seek there only. You cannot keep seeking for love in all the wrong places, because you're always going to be afraid that you're not going to find it. You're going to be demanding that something outside of you be the love that you're looking for. You got to seek for love where it is, where God placed it in us. Because God created it as itself, and God is within us. And we're inside of God. So there's a oneness that is happening here, guaranteed to be the place where we're going to find our salvation, because it's a place where God is, where love is. So we have to make this decision that we must be willing to seek only there. Look for truth only where it is. Otherwise, your purpose is divided, and you will attempt to follow two plans for salvation that are diametrically opposed in all ways. The result can only bring confusion, misery, and a deep sense of failure and despair. This is why most of us, while we're on that bridge moving from ego to essence, will feel discombobulated for a while. We're going to feel schizophrenic, like we're believing two separate belief systems. And that is part of the process. I promise you, you're not going crazy. You're just in the process of returning to the truth. You're in the process of awakening. So it will feel like you're in a bipolar state, in a schizophrenic state. Let that be okay. Let that be okay, so that you don't fight against it. The ego wants you to retreat. But if you say this is just part of the journey, you will be able to keep moving. I promise you, it will be worth you continuing to believe that your truth is where God said it is. Paragraph 6. How can you escape all this? Very simply, the idea for today is the answer. Only God's plan for salvation will work. There can be no real conflict about this, because there is no possible alternative to God's plan that will save you. There's just nothing else. His is the only plan that is certain in its outcome. His is the only plan that must succeed. Paragraph 7. Let us practice recognizing this certainty today, and let us rejoice that there is an answer to what seems to be a conflict with no resolution possible. All things are possible to God. Salvation must be yours because of His plan, which cannot fail. See, God has guaranteed that we're already saved. God knows us as powerful, pure consciousness, that our mind and God's mind are one, and that whatever God desires through us will manifest. It will absolutely create the life that we desire. Fun, easy, joyful, organic, in the flow, natural, perfect, and fulfilling. But when we think against God, we will block it. And that's where we make our life very difficult. So we have set up an incredible amount of systems outside of us with rules and regulations that make the process difficult. Have you ever stopped to think about all of the laws that have been written that makes no sense? All of the ridiculousness of the processes in the medical field, in the legal field, in the school system. Anything that the government has put rules and regulations around, notice how it begins to eventually fall under the weight of its own bureaucracy. Why? Because the ego loves to complicate things so that we never seek what it is that we're looking for. Begin to notice it out there. So this process, because it's so simple, most people want to avoid it. Because it's so simple. I am the truth. I am the light. I am the way. Why? Because God placed it here. That's why it cannot fail, but we have to decide where to look, only where it is going to succeed. Paragraph 8. Begin the 2 longer practice periods for today by thinking about today's idea and realizing that it contains 2 parts, each making equal contribution to the whole. God's plan for your salvation will work, and other plans will not. Do not allow yourself to become depressed or angry at the second part. It is inherent in the first. And in the first is your full release from all your own insane attempts and mad proposals to free yourself. So again, we got to pay attention to these 2 parts. They have led to depression and anger, but God's plan will succeed. It will lead to release and joy. Remembering this, let us devote the remainder of the extended practice periods to asking God to reveal His plan to ask. Ask Him very specifically, ask God very specifically, what would you have me do? God, what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say and to whom? So this, you allow God to guide you. We enter into a flow. What would you have me do? Where would you have me go? Do I turn here? Do I turn there? Should I go to the store now or should I stay home? And what would you have me say and to whom? You're in a situation with somebody. God, what would I say to that person? You walk into a cocktail party. You walk into the bank. You walk into the grocery store. You walk into wherever you walk in. God, who do I talk to today? And let the movement move you. Let something guide you. Ooh, let me go to the right. Ooh, I bring to mind a person who has, for me, actually, I saw a vision of a tall gentleman who was going to have silver colored hair. For about a year, I saw that vision. When I met Ken, tall, silver colored hair. I never saw the face in my visions, but I knew that that was coming. My next vision, I saw a man, the guy that I'm dating now, Dan, I saw a man where I didn't really get a face, but I had a sensation of the essence of who he was. And it's like, as I've gotten to know Dan, it's like he matches that essence because I felt it. I felt it inside of me. So I was just waiting for that. I wasn't looking for these men. I wasn't going out there searching the bars or getting online looking for that specifically, but I had a knowingness that when I met what I was feeling was the one at that time, obviously, that I would know it. And I did. I have. So let's go to sentence 6 in paragraph 9. Give him, God, full charge of the rest of the practice period, and let him tell you what needs to be done by you in his plan for your salvation. We're developing trust in listening to God and trusting that God's voice is going to guide us, and the voice of God is the Holy Spirit in us, or intuition, or whatever you want to call it. Don't get hung up on these terms. Sentence 7. He will answer in proportion to your willingness to hear his voice. He will answer in proportion to your willingness. We're always in charge here. Refuse not to hear. Don't block it. Don't get busy. Don't get sleepy. Don't get tired. Don't get confused. Don't get all worked up about, I can't do this. This is hard. This is difficult. You have to be willing to let the truth be true for you and let it reveal itself to you. This is how we develop trust in this guidance that frees us. That is where our salvation is in trusting the truth that is always real, that cannot be threatened. Why? Because it's God's truth and it's eternal, and every person who has awakened discovers this, but they can't give it to us. We have to have our own experience. Why? Because we have to choose to align our mind with God's. Nobody can force us to do that. No matter how much they brainwash us, nobody can force us to do that. We have to be willing to do that ourselves. Sentence 9, paragraph 9. The very fact that you are doing the exercises proves that you have some willingness to listen. This is enough to establish your claim to God's answer. In the shorter practice periods, tell yourself often that God's plan for salvation and only his plan will work. Be alert to all temptation to hold grievances today and respond to them with this form of today's idea. Holding grievances is the opposite of God's plan for salvation, and only his plan will work. Sentence 5, try to remember today's idea some 6 or 7 times an hour. Yes, this is asking for a lot, but do you want to be free? Do you want to be saved? There could be no better way to spend a half minute or less than to remember the source of your salvation and to see it where it is. I promise you, probably 100 times an hour, you're telling yourself what's wrong with you, what's wrong with the world, who did you wrong. You're putting yourself in prison, in emotional prison. You're talking about what's not working. You're telling yourself your body doesn't look right. You don't have enough this. You don't have enough that. Look at this person. Look at that one. How could they? If only this would change. Our entire hour is spent with our untrained mind talking about what's not working or what it is that we should have so that things would be better. When all we need to do is accept the truth that is true always. 2 parts. Acknowledge to God, what would you have me do? Because you are my path to salvation. What would you have me, where would you have me go? Who should I meet and what do we talk about? And number 2, if I am opposing this, if I'm with a grievance, if I'm holding something as responsible for my joy, then I am the one who has blocked myself because I'm using something opposite to God's plan. And recognize only God's plan will work. So if only his plan works, let me ask him instead of creating an obstacle to it. Very simple. Here is our lesson for today. Practice it often because lesson 71 is powerful. Only God's plan for salvation will work, period. Let that be your truth and enjoy just sitting in silence and stillness and recognize that God's plan is already done. You're already really free. You're just using your freedom to perceive yourself in bondage. Isn't that amazing? Thanks a bunch, and I'll see you in the next lesson.